Good? All good? क्या चल रहा है अभी? What is going on in other subjects? Environment, ecology, how is it going on? ठीक है? Good. How about the content that they have given online? Have you gone through that? It is very beautifully made. कल मिला था ना टेलीग्राम में, ओपन करके देखा कि नहीं? हाँ? And see, he is one guy, Saran sir, he is known for no nonsense in the class. He comes, he teaches, he goes. No yari dosti, no bhai bandi, no jani dushmani, nothing he will do. And whatever is important for exam, only that he will teach. He will not cross a line, he will not leave anything, he will not teach anything which is not important for the exam. So he follows that. He has written mains 7 times, but could not clear for some reasons, because the only reason is, I keep telling you, he did not pay adequate attention to his optional. So that's the one area he struggled. So though he has some attempts, but he says, sir, I am happy teaching now. So that's how teaching, once it draws you into teaching, उसके बाद कुछ भी मजा नहीं आता है, ठीक है? So try to take as much as possible advantage of his presence. He is one guy, I'll ask him to take some classes on only prelims, how to tackle prelims, because he is one guy who's always been getting very high score in prelims. So he'll tell you what was his approach, so that somebody who is struggling with prelims, they can try to understand the dynamics. Okay? Probably Azad sir will come next month. I am planning to give him art and culture part, a very veteran teacher on art and culture. I am just thinking, contemplating. World history also he teaches very well, and art and culture, these are the 2 dimensions I am contemplating which to give to him. From the prelims perspective, art and culture assumes greater significance, so probably I'll end up giving him art and culture. Maybe he'll end up either in the last week of January or first week of February, something like that. I am talking to him, let's see how things can open up. I have spoken to Pavneet sir, maybe fag end of March or first week of April. He'll come to give you he is an expert in IR and international relations and current affairs also. I'll try to ask him to speak on certain dimensions. Okay? My international relations knowledge, the dimensional delivery, understanding of issues, all the credit goes to Pavneet sir only. So though I have not been his classroom student, but I am that Eklavya Shishu of Pavneet sir. So he has had a great influence in my understanding of concepts. Whatever I spoke yesterday related to Afghanistan in particular, is all the credit goes to Pavneet sir only. Okay, so great guy, but again in the classroom no nonsense guy. So that's again a big challenge with him. So you need to be very, very disciplined when you sit in his class. Okay, there have been instances in Wajiram when he has thrown students with collar also outside the classroom. So you have to be a little careful when you, no phones, nothing, ठीक है? फालतू में कुछ मत करना. सरदार वैसे ही दिमाग होता नहीं है, ठीक है? तो और ऊपर से तुम गुस्सा दिलाओगे तो हो गया, ठीक? चलो, we'll start. Yesterday, any doubts? Anybody? India, Afghanistan? Any clarifications you want? You are free to ask. If not, we'll go ahead. Premlata? Huh? No doubts whatsoever. Did you try to compare your Bangalore notes with Hyderabad notes, Afghanistan? Huh? Take. Chal. Let's go ahead. India-Sri-Lanka relations. See, before we actually venture into this topic of India-Sri Lanka, see, you would be saying, whenever India map is depicted, even if you Google now India map, Sri Lanka is shown in that map. Why is it so? You Google US map, US will come. You Google China map, China will come. But why is it that when I am Googling India map, Sri Lanka is also shown in your maps also? The rooms में बड़े-बड़े maps लगाते हैं ना, जो कभी पढ़ते नहीं, तो उसके ऊपर भी देखोगे श्रीलंका is there. Why is it so? Geography हो गया है ना? हाँ बोलो. Why is it so? Why Sri Lanka is not objecting to it? It should object, right? Because ऊपर लिखा है इंडिया पॉलिटिकल मैप और नीचे श्रीलंका भी दिखा रहे हो. पाकिस्तान दिखाते हो? नहीं दिखाते हो ना. मालदीव्स दिखाते हो? मोस्टली नहीं. श्रीलंका, what you call, बांग्लादेश दिखाते हो? No. But why are you showing Sri Lanka, and why is it that Sri Lanka is silent about it? There should be a reason. हाँ, अरे ऐसे ही फालतू सवाल पूछे जाते हैं इंटरव्यू में, ठीक है. Why is it so that in India's map Sri Lanka is also shown, and why is it that Sri Lanka is silent about it? Is there some agreement, is there some treaty, or is it some convention through which I can show Sri Lanka as part of my territory? Come on, guess, wild guess, Raksha. Wild guess can be anything. Why are they not objecting to this? See, if we show a small portion of any other country also, there will be a big issue. Nepal recently showed Kala Pani as its territory, one small territory on the piece of map, and we made huge issue out of it. We got it removed eventually. But why is it that entire country you are showing under India's map and that country is silent about it? बनाओ box बनाओ. कल सुबह I want the answer to this. I'll pick up who will give the answer, and I have already made up my mind whom to ask. ठीक है पवन? हाँ, good. अकलमंद को इशारा काफी है, ठीक है. What did I say, पवन? తెలియదు కదా, అందుకే హిందీలో చెప్పా. Good. चलो. Now see, when we see Sri Lanka, see, listen. When we see Sri Lanka, we never look at Sri Lanka with an element of suspicion. Did we ever? The kind of suspicion you have for China, for Bangladesh, for Pakistan, for Afghanistan, for that matter any other country in the world, but that suspicion has generally been missing when it comes to Sri Lanka. Why is it so? And the relationships have not been good, let me tell you. But the element of suspicion has never been there because of the cultural affinity that you need to understand. Historians have called Sri Lanka to be the cultural backyard of India. Cultural backyard of India, primarily because of one dimensional presence of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. And you have all studied in history that Buddhism travelled from India to Sri Lanka. Who was the guy who took it? Who was the guy? Good. So this guy took Buddhism from India to Sri Lanka, and Buddhism flourished there. In whatever form, Buddhism flourished there. So that is why over a period of time it so happened that it became the cultural backyard of our country. And when the Britishers came, they took the control, physical control of Sri Lanka in early 1800 to 1803, and this was a direct consequence of the British and French rivalry in Europe. So that is when Sri Lanka came under the control of Britishers. So 1800 till 1948, 47-48, when Sri Lanka got its independence, for 150 years what you call Sri Lanka was in the direct control of the Britishers. And what happened is, what the Britishers did, Britishers basically went to Sri Lanka to carry out, what you call cultivation, basically the plantational work, tea, coffee, rubber, in these items they wanted to do cultivation. And to carry out cultivation there, they took lot of Indian laborers to go and work in Sri Lanka. So what happened in these 150 years, it so happened that we are interacting with Sri Lanka, but technically we are interacting with our own people. So that cultural affinity developed between India and Sri Lanka. But one dimension that we need to understand is, in Sri Lanka, Sinhalese happens to be the majority. Sinhalese happens to be the majority, and the Indians who were taken from India to Sri Lanka to work in the plantations of Sri Lanka were primarily Tamilians. So what happened? These Tamilian people who were taken by Britishers to Sri Lanka to work as indentured labor in Sri Lanka, they became the minority in Sri Lanka. But British played a bad game here. They created a fault line in the form of Tamil. how it created, how it got unfolded, all the dimensions we will study. Okay? But one dimension you need to understand is that when we talk about India and Sri Lanka, generally that insecurity element which is very prominent when it comes to Pakistan, Bangladesh, China or any other country, that dimension of insecurity is not prolonged in case of Sri Lanka. Insecurity came on couple of occasions, insecurity came, but we could address that insecurity immediately. And one more dimension that we need to understand is that historically the importance of Sri Lanka because of its geographical location was not understood by many, because nobody knew that over a period of time this route along the Indian Ocean will become the primary route of navigation for trade and commerce. So many countries did not understand the importance of Sri Lanka, geographical importance of Sri Lanka. It was only in the earlier 20th century that people realized this country is located at a place which can be a game changer for their trade and commerce. Okay? So you need to understand certain dimensions, what is that, and all these things I will discuss in the classroom. Okay? So we will start with India-Sri Lanka relation, a small chapter, not a big chapter, but good about 30-40 slides would be there. This is the political map of Sri Lanka. One country, one place that you need to have throw some attention is, in the other slide I will show. This is that area called Jaffna. Try to locate this important what you call areas in the map. One is Jaffna. If you see this, Sri Lanka's capital is Colombo, right? And there is one province or one territory in the heart of Sri Lanka called Kandy, K-A-N-D-Y. When the Britishers, this is not that Kandy that you are imagining. Okay? So when the Britishers took control of Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka was historically called country of Ceylon, C-E-Y-L-O-N. This was the name of Sri Lanka. Okay? So now when Britishers took over Ceylon, this Kandy was not under the control of them. This is very important element that you need to understand. And over a period of time, the Britishers realized, in the absence of getting this, if I have to send something from here, I was either taking this route or I was taking this route, and when I was taking this route, he is creating disturbance all over the entire journey. So over a period of time, Britishers realized, I need to take care of Kandy also. It means I need to take over Kandy also. So it is after taking over Sri Lanka, another 15-18 years afterwards, Kandy comes under the control of Sri Lanka, that under the control of Britishers, when they wanted to create what you call important trade routes cutting across the central province called Kandy. So this is very important, right? And when we talk about one element called LTTE, Liberation of Tamil Tigers Elam, when I talk about them, you need to understand that their primary presence or the stronghold of the LTTE was in this particular region. The north and the northeastern region was their stronghold area, the LTTEs, right? And there was an occasion, if you see this map, this is that famous Ram Setu, bridge or the Adams bridge also, right? So there is a lot of controversy related to name also, why this name of Adams bridge came and all these things. So you can Google about that whenever you have spare time, but you should do that, right? Now this was an important connect between India and Sri Lanka, right? And there was a time during the fight against LTT by Sri Lanka had cut off this entire area. So it wanted to corner LTT, and this was the time, and there was a naval blockade established, no food, no supplies to LTT, the LTT dominated areas. This was the time when India gave a warning to Sri Lanka, if you do not clear the naval blockade, I will attack Sri Lanka. That was the first and probably the last warning that India gave to any independent country after India became independent. So this is the background story. Now we will go ahead. As I told you, try to find out the important what you call cities and the locations, because these names will come in your what you call lecture. Okay? Don't get confused. This is the so called Adams bridge or the Ram Setu that we speak about, very important. and try to locate important geographical features in and around Sri Lanka, very important from examination point of view. Okay? And the question I gave you at the beginning of the class is also very important from the examination point of view, right? Chalo, we know that epic times we have relation with Sri Lanka because this fellow took over Lord Rama's wife to Sri Lanka, and we sent one diplomat from India to go and through diplomacy go and try to convince Ravana to give back Sita, right? It is diplomacy only, right? Modern times diplomacy. Before the war is declared, you send diplomats to negotiate. Hello, don't fight. Okay? So what he does, when Hanuman goes to Sri Lanka, he carries out one task. What is the task? Power projection. This is what exactly he does. He says, my Rama is a great king and he has so much of power. He will destroy your kingdom before you open your eyes. So that is what he is trying to do. He is trying to do power projection, what we try to do even today in modern times in diplomacy, right? So we have that connect, historical connect also, and Adams Bridge happens to be one of the important connect. And as I told you, Buddhism is also one important, very strong bonding between India and Sri Lanka. And lastly, it is said that historically even Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he visited what you call Sri Lanka as part of his Udasis. Please underline this word Udasis, make a note of this word and make a list of places across the globe that Guru Nanak travelled as part of his Udasis. This guy went as far as Iran also. So as part of the Udasis, he travelled across the globe, and which are the important modern day what you call cities or towns which all he visited, very important from examination point of view. And one of the places that he visited is the what you call Sri Lanka, also visited Sri Lanka. Now coming back to the modern times history, from 1796 till 1900, the British East India Company's conquest of Sri Lanka, which the British called Ceylon, occurred during the wars of French Revolution 1792 to 1801. When the French Revolution was happening, the taking over of Sri Lanka, the erstwhile Ceylon, by British is co-terminus with the French Revolution. When the Netherlands came under the French control, when the French took over Netherlands, this was the time the Britishers decided to take over Ceylon from their influence, right? Began to move into Sri Lanka from India. The Dutch, after a half-hearted resistance, so it means that before 1796, Sri Lanka was under the control of Dutch. Very important, not Portuguese, do not get confused. It is the Dutch. Now, tomorrow I will ask who were this Dutch. Please make a box. Who are called Dutch? Which countries of modern contemporary times were in medieval times classified as Dutch countries? Okay? So you should know the meaning of this word Dutch. Okay? So from Dutch, the Britishers took over what you call is the Ceylon. The British had thought the conquest as temporary and administered the island from Madras. It means that the base for command and control over Sri Lanka was being carried out from Madras, right? And in southern India. And one more dimension that you need to understand, probably that is the reason why when we say British Indian Empire, we do not include Sri Lanka in that. Probably that is the reason why when we say British Indian Empire, because the Sri Lanka was never considered to be part of the British Indian Empire, it was always seen as a separate entity. So when the British conquered India, the conquering of what you call Sri Lanka was not considered to be part of India. The way the other provinces were amalgamated under the British Indian Empire, Sri Lanka was never amalgamated. Maybe the water body was a major geographical factor that did not allow them or did not make them feel also like that, right? Now, the British had thought the conquest temporary and administered the island from Madras in southern India. The war with France revealed Sri Lanka's strategic value. However, and the British consequently decided to make their hold on the island permanent. So in 1802, Ceylon was made a crown colony, very, very important. So though they got the control of Sri Lanka in 1796 itself, they decided to make it a crown colony only in the year 1802. See, couple of years in Sri Lankan history are important. 1818, 1815, all these time frames will come. Please make a note of timeline chronology. So, in 1802, Ceylon was made a crown colony, and by the Treaty of Amiens, please make a note of this treaty. By the Treaty of Amiens with France, British possession of maritime Ceylon was confirmed. So, the treaty that was signed between Britain and France is called the Treaty of Amiens. Very important for prelims also, they will ask. The Treaty of Amiens between French and British was signed after taking over which territory by the Britishers. Okay? So, Treaty of Amiens very important for your prelims also. Then not long after their arrival in 1796, the British established contact with the King of Kandy. Now, you understand who is the King of Kandy? The central province in the heart of Sri Lanka, right? And contracted to replace the Dutch as protectors of the kingdom. It means when the Britishers took over Ceylon, they took over the other parts of Ceylon, present day Sri Lanka, but they did not get the control of Kandy. It means Kandy continued to be under the control of the Dutch empires, right? So, as they began to organize the administration, the British realized that the continuing independence of Kandy poses problems. As I told you, the problems of trade, the problems of command and control, right? The frontier with Kandy had to be guarded at much expense. It means the entire territory along the Kandy was to be guarded very strongly because of the Dutch presence there also, right? So, trade with the highlands was hampered by customs posts and political insecurity, and land communications between the west and the east would be quicker if roads could be built through the heart of Kandy, right. So, this is when the advantages of the political unification were obvious to the British, but the Kandians remained deeply suspicious of all the foreigners. So, they did not allow or they did not accept the British suzerainty that easily. So, the British was facing the problem, one is political insecurity, secondly whatever trade in and around Kandy that they were carrying out, they were getting lot of resistance from the Kandians, and thirdly the cost of safeguarding the defences along the Kandy was also seeming very costly to the Britishers. So, in this backdrop, the first attempt by the Britishers to capture Kandy was done in 1803. In 1802, they entered what you call Sri Lanka. Physically, after the Ceylon was declared as a British crown colony, after 1 year, they tried to get over Kandy, but ended in failure. The king was popular with the nobility. Nobility is the high-ranking officials or the rich people in his kingdom who were supportive of the king. So, the king was popular with the nobility who united behind him to rout the British forces. Subsequently, though growing dissensions within the kingdom gave the British an opportunity to interfere in the Kandian affairs. Very important. Growing dissensions, and these dissensions were planted by the Britishers. Same strategy what they used in India, divide and rule. Exactly. Okay. So, with the help of the local Kandian chiefs whose relation with the king had been deteriorating, the Britishers succeeded in taking over Kandy in 1815. So, very important timeline in the history of Sri Lanka. The Kandy came under the control of Britishers in 1815. So, take over the control. Soon after the acquisition, the British guaranteed the Kandians their privileges and rights, as well as the preservation of customary laws, institutions and religion. Can you relate this to something in India? Can you relate this to something in India? Can you relate this to something in India? Which state we gave these privileges? The Northeast and the state of J&K. Similar things happened in India. Okay? So, initially Kandy was administered separately without any abrupt change from traditional patterns. However, the trend towards reducing the status of the nobility and of the Buddhist faith was unmistakable. This led to a popular rebellion against the British. See, try to understand, trying to reduce the status of nobility and also of the Buddhist faith. Why? Because by this time Sri Lanka had started its Christian missionaries in Sri Lanka. Britishers had started its Christian missionaries in Sri Lanka, and at the same time they tried to reduce the status, deteriorate the status of nobility in their kingdom. So this is when they got lot of resistance from the Kandians, right? And what happened? This led to a popular rebellion against the British control in 1818. After it was suppressed, the Kandian provinces were integrated with the rest of the country. So the final integration happened only after 1818. Though the physical control came in 1815, the complete control came in the year 1818. So 1796 Britishers entering the Sri Lanka, 1802 Ceylon declared as the British Crown colony, 1803 Britishers trying to venture into Kandy failed, 1815 finally they get the what you call, they defeat the Kandian chiefs and they get the control of what you call Kandy. But however, the struggle to get complete control continued for 3 years. Finally in the year 1818 they removed all the nobility and completely integrated the entire island nation of Ceylon into the British colony. So now entire Ceylon, C-E-Y-L-O-N, became a British Crown colony, So the presence of Dutch in Ceylon and Kandy has been removed starting from 1796 to 1818. Got it? So this is the chronology of the British taking over of Sri Lanka. Okay? Now, the native people of Sri Lanka, then Ceylon, were colonially under the British but were not a part of British Indian Empire, being administered separately. So India became independent in 47 and Ceylon became independent in 1948. In 1948, India advocated the idea of federation based on mutual defense agreement. This is the biggest mistake Nehru did. India declared or India what you call advocated the idea of federation based on mutual defense agreement. Now you need to understand what is the meaning of this. Federation based on mutual federation based on mutual defense. This is the problem. What happened? See, what is a federation? Hello? गोली मार दूंगा. हाँ, what is a federation? What is a federation? Hello? अरे पॉलिटिक्स कौन कौन अटेंड कर रहा है? सारे ही अटेंड कर रहे हो? हाँ, what is a federation? Group of people going to party. हाँ. What is a federation? हाँ, कौन बताएगा? प्रेमलता. She says agreement between two or more independent political entities to form a చదివితే ఉన్నమతిపోయిందంట. To form a I said federation is nothing but an agreement between two or more independent political entities to form a government ki deshaniki teda undi. They are not coming to form a government. You mean to say NDA is a government or a federation? To form a Rahul? To form a yes or no? Right to secede is the biggest in USA. the 50 states making United States of America. United by choice, that is why it is called United States. It is not a country. If you see in the literal meaning, the states have come together to form a country, and if you know, these states have the right to even exit that federation. So a federation is basically nothing but an agreement between two or more political entities to form an independent country with the right to recede or secede. Now, when Nehru used this word federation in his whatever offer, what Sri Lanka felt, this guy is planning to take over Sri Lanka. India is planning to annex Sri Lanka. As I told you, the importance of Sri Lanka the world realized only in the mid of 20th century, and this was a time when Ceylon became independent. In this backdrop, what happens is Sri Lanka feels, and when a small country feels insecure, it will go to a big country. So it went back to the same country that ruled it for 150 years. ब्रिटेन बोला अरे तुमको अभी तो छोड़ के आए हम, बोला नहीं सर आपको वापस आना पड़ेगा वरना इंडिया विल टेक ओवर. So this offer of Nehru to form a strong federation was mistaken as an effort to annex Sri Lanka. So for certain amount of time, Sri Lanka became insecure with India, and if you know, this was the time frame 47-48, as you all know, this was the time frame when we were integrating all the princely states. So Sri Lanka felt India is now planning to take over Sri Lanka also and make it part of its federation, make it part of its own country. So this was mistaken, what you call, offer of India to Sri Lanka. So this created, that is why in India-Sri Lanka relationship, the insecurity is not prolonged. कुछ देर के लिए रहेगा फिर चला जाए. It is like that boyfriend girlfriend, no? 2-4 दिन बात नहीं करेंगे, फिर एक हफ्ते के बाद फिर से बात करना शुरू करेंगे. Something like that will happen between India and Sri Lanka. Not once, not twice, not thrice, many times it will happen because of certain dimensions. ठीक है? Now, as I told you, the idea of federation based on a mutual defense with India on the basis of a larger federation. This is what India tried to say. But Ceylon became extremely suspicious of India. India time and again did try to convey to Ceylon that it had no expansionist agenda and acknowledged its respect for Ceylon's independence and sovereignty. But it did not happen so easily, right? And finally, Ceylon was renamed as Sri Lanka in 1972. Please make a note of this time. And later in 1970, it was officially named as Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. What is India's name? अरे डूब के मर जाओ सारे. बनाओ बॉक्स. After the class, पानी लो हाथ में and dive deep into that water and commit suicide. ठीक है? हाँ, I'm asking India's official name. बनाओ बॉक्स बनाओ यार, कुछ भी मत बोलो, ठीक है? Don't use WhatsApp information. ठीक है? Don't say भारत माता की जय. ठीक है? ठीक है? Now, as an autonomous federation based on mutual defense alignment with the British, Ceylon was renamed as the Sri Lanka in 1972, and later in 1978 it was officially named the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, right? Now what happened? What we proposed, they went and signed with Britain. So this agreement between Sri Lanka, the defense treaty between Sri Lanka and Britain was part of your alliance formation. As you know, इसका biggest ally कौन है? Who is the biggest ally of Britain at that time? अरे जिसके पास ये गया था, save me, हाँ US. So if they were biggest allies, if Sri Lanka signs an alliance partnership with Britain, what technically it means? Indirectly, Sri Lanka has joined hands with what you call the alliance of US. Okay? So now the second country who brought Cold War politics to your doorsteps. First was Pakistan and immediately after that was Sri Lanka. So your effort to stay away from Cold War politics, because when we decided to be non-aligned as part of non-alignment movement, two countries in the neighborhood, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, brought Cold War politics to the doorsteps of India. So by Pakistan joining directly an alliance partnership with what you call US and Sri Lanka joining with Britain, who happens to be the biggest ally partner of what you call US. And in alliance, you know, if there is an alliance of 30 countries, a war on any one country would be deemed to be a war on all the alliance countries, and all the alliance countries can collectively fight back against that country. So this is the storyline as of now. And if they have signed alliance, it means the insecurity is present, insecurity is visible. Try to understand this. Okay? Then the Britishers took Tamil in India. I am going back to history now. Why the historical background of the Tamil trump card? This is what we have used quite often in Sri Lanka from 1950s till 1990s or later part of 1990s also. Now we don't do that, but erstwhile we used to do it. So it is so Tamil population who were taken from India to Sri Lanka to work as indentured labor in Sri Lanka is India's fault line in Sri Lanka, which I can encash whenever the situation demands. Now we will see how the situation demands. Firstly, the Britishers took Tamil in indentured labor to Sri Lanka in the early 1830s, and this was also the time frame when the Indians were taken as indentured labor to Africa, to America, even to Canada. This was the time period. 1830s historically is known for the time period of great migrations of the migrant laborers across the globe. The ships used to take hundreds and hundreds of Indians to work as labor in the colonies of what you call Britain in Africa, America and also Northern America. Okay? So this was the time period. This labor was being employed in the tea, coffee and rubber plantations of northern and northeastern Sri Lanka. I specifically drew a line, no, northern and northeastern Sri Lanka. That is when I told you that this part of the country has the major what you call Tamil population. This part of the country has major northern part and the northeastern part has the major Tamil population, because the Britishers took them historically to work as indentured labor in what you call Sri Lanka. Now what happened? These labor were not allowed to mingle with the local Sinhala population, and what happened? The British deliberately wanted to create a fault line for capitalizing in future. Now try to imagine you are local Sinhala people, certain Indians are brought to your country and you are not allowed to mingle with them. So you, when, as I told you, if you are not talking, there is an element of, obviously there is an element of suspicion. That is how the continuation of dialogue in international relations is a very important aspect. If I told you we called Taliban to India, we continuously engaged with Taliban to know their real intent. Is there any anti-India sentiment brewing in their minds or not? So because we would become suspicious otherwise. Now this suspicion of the Sinhala population towards the Tamil population over a period of time only increased. To add to this suspicion, British also does some dirty things. What they do? They start, the Britishers gradually used the Christian missionaries in converting this Tamil laborers to Christianity. So what they did? They gradually started converting this Indian Tamil laborers to Christianity. They also started imparting education to these laborers. To avoid the Sinhala children from this educational effort, the Britishers started this education in Tamil language. Very beautifully played card. Okay? To avoid the Sinhala children getting education, they started teaching or education in Tamil language, and this was gradually shifted to English. So now, as I told you, wherever Britishers ruled, working on the British camp as an officer or as some clerical grade person was deemed to be a higher social status, and top of it, giving them education initially in Tamil and gradually only in English only widened this suspicion between Sinhalese and the Tamil population, right. Now what happens? The British had a larger aim of converting them into loyal class who would be subordinated to British in future, who would be, see the beauty of Britain is they think 500 years ahead. The beauty of India is we cannot think 5 minutes ahead. That's the beauty of India. And the beauty of Britain is they think 500 years ahead what will happen, and they make a move accordingly like that. So people say that the plan of partitioning India and Pakistan, the seeds of this were sown in 1905, but that is not true. The seeds of partition were sown 200 years before in some ways. So what is that some ways? Try to find out, Google it. So same way, what was the intention is to create a loyal class of Britishers in Sri Lanka, so that in future if I have to leave Sri Lanka, still I have a loyal class sitting in Sri Lanka who are educated, who are Christians, and who are, because I gave them the opportunity, definitely their socio-economic status would also be high. So even if my political control on these people would be reduced after I leave this country, but I can still continue to have the trade relationships with this particular country through this loyal class that I will create, right. Now the by strategically eliminating the local Sinhalas from this, the Britishers created a class divide in the society. Gradually these British trained Tamil minority started occupying important administrative positions in the Ceylon colony. So what happened? Gradually the Sinhala people became marginalized and the Tamilians started taking important administrative positions in Ceylon. So and if this happens, it is quite but obvious this suspicion will only grow. This suspicion of Sinhala people towards the Tamilian will only grow. So whatever fights you see between the Sinhalese majority and the Tamilian minority in Sri Lanka today, it has a historical past, and it is not a natural animosity, it is an artificial animosity that was inseminated by the Britishers with a definite self-interest. That you need to understand. Okay? So the Sinhala majority and the Tamilian minority. Sri Lanka, however, since its inception has been driven by Sinhalese majority policy, which was instrumental in creating alienation in the minds of Tamils residing in the northern Sri Lanka, thereby creating a fault line. So when the Britishers left, obviously Sri Lanka will try to correct the mistakes that have been done by the Britishers. So the moment the Britishers left Sri Lanka in 1948, when Sri Lanka became independent, they started trying to create policies which are more closer to Sinhala majority people. So the Tamil population from 1802 till 1948, who got the primal importance or primacy in education, primacy in employment, primacy in conversion to Christianity, now they suddenly felt what you call fatherless or parentless. So and in this particular gap, the Sri Lanka tries to give whatever it could not give in the presence of Britishers to Sinhala population by amending all the policies of Sinhala in favor of the Sinhalese majority. So again insecurity now develops. Earlier from 1802 to 1948, insecurity was in Sinhala population. After 1948, the insecurity is in Tamil population. So that is how the shifting of insecurity happened from one sect of society to other sect of society, right. This class divide created unrest in the society and the local Sinhalese started resisting against the same. This gradually resulted in scenario where the government had to act. So this is when the people started fighting on the streets, then the government decided before it is too late, I have to act. And how did they act? Here one must understand that the Britishers as a policy always imported labor from one colony to the other colony. They never used the same labor of the same country in that country. This was aimed to avoid power concentration or a rebellion amongst the labor class. So the British feared that if these labor class becomes powerful, it may lead to an uprising, finally into a revolt. So that is the reason why they will never use the labor class of that particular country in the same country. They will take them to another country. Okay? Now, what the government here, the government said no, it is the time to act. What the Sri Lankan government did? Sri Lanka made Sinhalese language compulsory. The moment Sinhalese language became compulsory, the Tamilians said, how can we learn Sinhalese language? It is not my language. So, for higher posts in the state services and the political landscape, this meant the Tamils felt isolated. These Tamils then looked at India for support. However, India did not provide any support and asked them to live there only and follow the local country law and order. Sri Lankan government continued the discrimination against these Tamilians because India was busy doing something else elsewhere at this point of time. So we said, जहाँ गए हो वहीं चुपचाप रहो, फालतू आवाज नहीं करना, ठीक है? So if you wish to stay there, you have to follow that country's customary laws. But this was only a cosmetic response upper side. अंदर से कुछ और starts, ठीक है? I'll tell you about that. Now, even the Tamil Nadu state government was asking to bring them back so that the returned Tamils can be used as vote banks for the state government. This always happens. This always happens. Now, in 1964, Lal Bahadur Shastri signed a pact with Sirimao Bandar Naike called the Shastri-Sirimao Pact. Please make a note, 1964 Shastri-Sirimao Pact. Shastri and Sirimao Pact. If you remember, this is the time frame 1961-62, and you all know we were already engaged with 61-62 we were engaged with war with conflict with China. अभी war बोलोगे मारूंगा. Conflict with China, ठीक है? As per this pact, India will accept returning of, very important, returning of not all. India said will accept returning of only few Tamilians. Sri Lanka promised to give citizenship to around 3 lakh Tamilians who migrated between and 1948 to 3 lakh people. Why? Because their own citizenship act was the way we also had our own citizenship rules. Their citizenship rules had some clauses where the Indians who migrated in this time frame did not get natural citizenship in Sri Lanka. So as per this pact, they decided whosoever had migrated in this point of time will also get Sri Lankan citizenship. In 1974, Indira Gandhi signed a pact with Sirimao with similar statements related to the old pact, but nothing concrete was achieved in both the cases. So it means that it was just limited to signatures to ease off the tension, but no concrete action was taken on ground in both the pacts, whether it was Sirimao Shastri Pact of 1964 or the 1974 Indira Gandhi and Sirimao Pact. So 10 years gap, nothing happened on ground, 1964 to 1974. You need to understand, after this, the emergency period in India starts. Yes or no? Try to understand what is happening parallelly in your country also. So the emergency period we enter, right? So in the though the objective of both this pact was to cool down the rising tempers, in 1970s Sri Lanka started tilting towards and started procuring defense products from US. India became insecure. Now, first Sinhala people were insecure, Then Tamil people were insecure. Now India becomes insecure. Obviously, when your small island neighbor nation is procuring defense equipment from one of the poles of Cold World War, you will obviously become insecure. See, why Sri Lanka need weapons in the first place? Why Sri Lanka needs weapons in the first place? Because what I promised here, sorry, it was only cosmetic. We had started creating trouble in Sri Lanka. This was the time when discussions were on in India how to reap the benefits of this fault line in Sri Lanka. So you will see gradually the birth of LTTE and TELO. These two organizations are born in Sri Lanka with India's help. Born in Sri Lanka with India's help. Let me come to that. Okay. So now India becomes insecure and started questioning this move of Sri Lanka. US was primarily trying to increase its presence in the Indian Ocean region. Why US gave weapons to Sri Lanka? Because it is not money. It is because it also understands the geostrategic significance of Sri Lanka and it wants to have physical presence in Sri Lanka so that it can exert its influence in the Indian Ocean geopolitics. This was the intention why US also gave weapons to Sri Lanka. See, always remember, these security related trades do not have only commercial dimension to it. Always remember, if a security major equipment is purchased or sold, it is not purely commercial in nature, it will have a simultaneous geopolitical hidden agenda also. So this was classical and evident in this place is that when US sold weapons to Sri Lanka, it primarily in exchange wanted to have its presence in Sri Lanka so that it can exert its influence in Indian Ocean region. I told you, when a bigger country offers an alliance support to a smaller country, in return it is seeking for preferential access, whether it is trade or polity or defense. So that is what US was trying to do here. In 1971, though the year 1971 is known as a turning point in India-Sri Lanka relations, because in 1971 during the Bangladesh war something happens here. Okay? During the 1971 Bangladesh war something happens. Sri Lanka was providing the refueling facilities to the aircrafts of Pakistan and also docking facility to very important US aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. Very important, please make a note of this aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. See, aircraft carrier in 1970s meant that the war is imminent. Try to understand, the war is imminent. Now, as a prudent UPSC student, you should ask a question, sir, what is the aircraft carrier doing of US in Indian Ocean? Nobody asked. You never asked. When I said this aircraft was in Indian Ocean in Sri Lanka, what is this aircraft doing here? Simple question, right? And in 1970s, aircraft means that country whose country's aircraft is that, the what you call aircraft carrier is that country is a global power, because in 1970s possessing a aircraft carrier was a big thing. And in the 1971 war, when you are fighting with Pakistan on one side, when you know that Pakistan has signed an alliance partnership with US and US aircraft carrier in Indian Ocean docking at Sri Lanka was a death signal to India. Okay, that US is also planning to open the front of Sri Lanka with India. So that is when Indira Gandhi was also shocked. And when Indira Gandhi was shocked, it said, let the war get over, I will give you a longer duration shock. So that is when she decided to teach a lesson to Sri Lanka. Okay? Though good sense prevailed, this guy did not use this against India in the 1971. It was docked and it left during the course of war. We gave passage, safe passage to this aircraft carrier to leave. If you know, because India established naval blockade along Sri Lanka also during the 1971 war. So we gave them passage and asked them to leave from here. So now what happens? India strongly objected to this. India decided to teach Sri Lanka lesson for harboring Indian enemies. The word is Indian enemy. So indirectly you are calling US also to be Indian enemy, right? So in this background, India decided to empower the Tamil population of Sri Lanka and develop it to carry out protests in Sri Lanka. So for the first time, India decides to empower them. Now, how do you empower citizens of your origin in another country? If he goes to America and he is working in a good company, I want to empower him. India wants to empower Pawan Kalyan. What it does? What it should do? I want to empower him. What is the meaning of empowerment here? How do you empower an individual or a group of individuals? Like, what do you need? Apple phone, iPad, MacBook, daily soap you will get to take bath. What do you need for empowerment? Hello? Arey, basic needs is not empowerment, it is bloody survival. Don't ask for Santur soap as empowerment. You need, one is weapons, the second is access to corridors of power. Say for example, Pawan Kalyan sitting in US knows personal mobile number of Modi. And Modi is every day good morning message to Pawan Kalyan, not Pawan Kalyan to Modi. मोदी सुबह उठते अरे पवन कल्याण सर को गुड मॉर्निंग बोलना है, पवन कल्याण जी शुभोदयम, अर्ली मॉर्निंग मैसेज. हु इज इंपॉर्टेंट हियर, Modi or Pawan Kalyan? Pawan Kalyan, because Modi wants to use Pawan Kalyan for a specific purpose. So that empowerment of the Tamilian population in this scenario came in two dimensions. One dimension came in terms of money, second dimension came in terms of weapon, and in fact third dimension came in form of training also. Now what we did in 1976, with the help of India's intelligence agency, two organizations were formed. Please make a note, extremely important. TELO, Tamil Elam Liberation Organization, and in the same year 1976, another organization called LTTE was created. LTTE, Liberation of Tamil Tiger Elams, and TELO, Tamil Elam Liberation Organization. Can anybody tell me why the need of two organizations? One is enough. Why two? थोड़ा दिमाग लगाओ. One is enough. But why we created two organizations? What was the need to create two? एक तो ठीक है ना? Because this was created to negotiate with the government, to open that political channel open for negotiation for more rights, more privileges, more powers with the government, and this was to become the resistance force. And your India's intelligence agency research and analysis wing was used by Indira Gandhi very cleverly. The way she used RAW in the liberation war of Bangladesh, the same tactics was used here. There were some problems. When the slide comes, I will discuss those problems here. The TLO was directed to politically negotiate with Sri Lankan government and seek autonomy in northern and the northeastern part, while LTT was asked to support TLO, organized localized violence. This is the factor. Now, I told you yesterday also, once you give a weapon to a monster, you cannot have any control on the trigger. Try to understand this. Once I give a weapon to a monster, you cannot have any control on the trigger. You give a gun to a small kid to play. Can you stop him from using the trigger? I am not saying he is a monster, though he is equal to a monster, but still. So, it means once you create a monster, give a weapon to the monster, you lose the control on the trigger of that particular weapon that you have given to that particular monster. Though the LTT was designed and aimed at creating localized violence only to create that pressure on Sri Lankan government to act swiftly, but what happens is over a period of time, this localized become nationalized violence. So, the LTT that was created by India goes out of control of India also. We will come to that, how it happens. Okay? Now, the LTT, this guy Prabhakaran was brought to India, trained in low intensity violence covertly, very, very important. And where did we learn this art of low intensity violence, how to conduct, कैसे होता है, हमने ये कहाँ सीखा? अफगानिस्तान में सीखा, देख के सीखा, करके नहीं सीखा, देख के सीखा, and same logic we applied here in Sri Lanka. Try to understand this. So now India is trying to make Sri Lanka a similar template of Afghanistan what was for US and Pakistan. Right? Getting understand? So this is how India is playing its card. The objective was that the Tamils put pressure on Sri Lanka to resist Sri Lanka directives and also take revenge against Sri Lanka for its mischief in 1971 war. The problem was we were wanting the LTT to resist and seek autonomy and not, we never wanted this part to become an independent country. But what happens over a period of time, the monster that you created, the monster that you trained, the monster that you weaponized, he said, hello, no autonomy, I want a separate country, I want a separate country. That is when India also felt, yaar humne kya kar diya. That is when India felt, though it did not say, but it felt. In 1977, Tamil riots happened where Jayawardene suppressed them. India reacted by saying it is Tamil genocide. It became a political issue in India. And if you know, this is the same time frame when we just came out of the emergency situation in India. So when this was happening, when India was questioning Jayawardene, what are you doing to my Tamil people? He said, पहले आपने गलेबान में झाँक के देखो तुम क्या कर रहे हो इंडिया. So first you look inwards in your own country, what you are doing in your own country, then teach me a lesson what to do in my own country. ठीक है? In 1980, India decided to take revenge for the Tamils, genocide revenge and the 1971 revenge. 1980s, Sri Lanka witnessed violence and counter-violence. India was doing exactly the same what US, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia did in Afghanistan. We were arming LTT and TLO against Sri Lanka to take revenge. So in 1984, Jayawardene saw that Indira Gandhi died and Rajiv Gandhi assumed power. So this he saw as an opportunity. He saw it as an opportunity that Rajiv Gandhi took over. In 1984, Sri Lanka approached US and Pakistan to suppress LTT and TLO. So again, earlier also went once, and again in 1984, after the death of Indira Gandhi, Sri Lanka thought a small window of opportunity. If US and Pakistan supports me now, I think I can able to solve this particular Tamil problem in Sri Lanka. They thought that Rajiv Gandhi, being a son of Indira Gandhi and not Indira Gandhi herself, maybe he will not take that hard stand against Sri Lanka what this lady took. So they took this as an opportunity of window to approach a superpower in 1984. And if you know, in 1984, US is engaged in Afghanistan. US is engaged in Afghanistan. Pakistan is also engaged in Afghanistan, right? US said, I am busy in Afghanistan. I will provide you arms and ammunition. Pakistan will provide you with training. हथियार मैं दे दूंगा, ट्रेनिंग ये दे देगा. मतलब इसने ट्रेनिंग का स्कूल खोल रखा है, तो हर किसी को ट्रेनिंग देगा. हाँ, so that is how it happens. ठीक है. So this further angered India. Pakistan, when it reached Sri Lanka, it said Jaffna has become hub of LTTE. Seal Jaffna and suppress the terrorists there. This is what Pakistan suggested to Sri Lanka कि Jaffna को seize करो. Jaffna was the northern part of Sri Lanka. Seize Jaffna and then suppress the terrorists there. Sri Lanka cut off essential supplies to Jaffna city. Civilians also got affected. India directed Sri Lanka to remove the cutoff. And Sri Lanka did not listen and told that they will carry out military operation. Rajiv Gandhi summoned RAW and asked what to do. RAW suggested threat Sri Lanka and provide air force supplies to Jaffna. So, threat Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka ko dhamkao. You tell him, if you do not what you call cut off this, what you call the supplies that you have cut off, the essential supplies to Jaffna, I am invading Sri Lanka. So, for the first time, Rajiv Gandhi told Sri Lanka, if you don't stop the blockade, India will invade Sri Lanka. In entire official communication of independent India, the only time that we used a word against a country, invade, is Sri Lanka. So, just imagine a natural neighbor, a cultural backyard, the same country you had to tell I will invade Sri Lanka. And this all happened because at regular periods of time, everybody gave importance to their own self-interest. Okay? So, now what happens? This was the first and the last time when India openly threatened any country. Rajiv Gandhi ordered the Air Force to carry supplies to Jaffna under an operation called, please make a note, Operation Poomalai. Very, very important. Operation Poomalai, Poomalai. Not many, rather very few know about this particular operation of Sri Lanka, India. Operation Poomalai, right? US and Pakistan both backed off support to Sri Lanka. Why? Suddenly, why this U-turn? Batao. Why this sudden U-turn? अरे why this sudden U-turn? दिमाग लगाओ. वो तो 71 में हो गया. अरे मैडम, इंदिरा गांधी भी चली गई, 84 भी हो गया, राजीव गांधी है. 15 साल पहले की बात नहीं. अब क्या हुआ? Come on, come on. Rajiv Gandhi said to America, if you go out of Sri Lanka, we will start trading immensely with each other. पैसा. The US को दिखा. That is when you will see in India computers start coming. No, this was the time period 85, 86, 87 when the trade with US is opened in the first time. It is said that this was the first departure from NAM of India. When Rajiv Gandhi gave a very good offer to US, if you come out of this, we will start having a strong trade relationships between India and US, and Sri Lanka's capacity to purchase weapons is very limited. My capacity to purchase weapons is very large. I will diversify my defense purchases. I will reduce my imports on dependence on Russia for my purchases. I will start purchasing from EU. So, in this backdrop, what US says, sorry, we are not interested in Sri Lanka. The moment US says we are not interested, obviously the puppy will also say, where is the puppy here? The puppy will also say, I am also not interested. Okay? So, this is what you need to understand how politics play. How politics play. Sri Lanka got isolated. India dropped the essential supplies and also called for recce missions. Recce missions is surveillance missions. Okay. Now in 1986, Jayawardene called Rajiv Gandhi and asked LTT to not create trouble. He wanted to patch up. Who wanted to patch up? Jayawardene wanted to patch up. On 29 July 1987, very important, please make a note, 1987, India signed an accord with Sri Lanka called India-Srilanka Accord. Now here India takes a U-turn. U-turn with LTT. This is when India tells LTT, beta ab hatiyar chhodne ka time aa gaya hai. But will the monster listen? No. The monster said, Papa, you only created me. I will decide what to do. The monster did not agree. So many U-turns in Sri Lanka's history. Okay? On 29 July 1987, when the accord was signed, the provisions for the accord were as possible. Please make a note of these 4 bullet points. First, autonomy to the Tamil in the north and the northeast. Jayawardene agreed to give autonomy to the Tamils in north and northeast. So even today, when India talks about autonomy of the Tamilians in the north and northeast, we always go back to this 1987 India-Sri Lanka Accord that was signed between Rajiv Gandhi and Sri Lanka. See, if you remember in the qualities of prime ministers, when I spoke neighborhood first policy, foreign policy under various prime ministers, this guy had the capability to negotiate very beautifully. Rajiv Gandhi. एक इसकी बात मानना पड़ेगा. Okay, this guy's capacity to negotiate, convince somebody to come and sign something is excellent. If you remember in Assam also, he made them to sign something called मेरा दिल कितनी बार तोड़ोगे रे एक दिन में तुम लोग. 1985 में क्या साइन किया? I remember that song, मेरा दिल भी कितना पागल है, हाँ, जो उम्मीद तुमसे करता है कि तुम आंसर दे दोगे. हाँ, एक्सेलेंट. असम अकॉर्ड ऑफ 1985. ठीक है, क्या हुआ रे? लास्ट इन फर्स्ट आउट. हाँ, दिस इज ए डायरेक्ट रिजल्ट ऑफ नो रिविजन. इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी की बुक किधर रखी है, याद है? हाँ? संध्या याद है? याद नहीं है सर. ऐसा कैसा होगा? यूपीएससी इज ऑल अबाउट रिवाइजिंग अगेन एंड अगेन एंड अगेन एंड अगेन. ठीक है, गो बैक एंड रिवाइज इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी एक बार. ठीक है. Sri Lanka is struggling with this even today. You will keep seeing this in news. Constitution amendment, constitution amendment. 2 countries are struggling with their constitution very badly. One is Sri Lanka, the second is Afghanistan is not struggling, they burnt it. No, they have a very strong constitution. Whether they believe in that or is not different, but they have a very good constitution. One more country struggling with their constitution. मतलब लिखना क्या है समझ में नहीं आ रहा सालों. Nepal. These are the 2 countries who are struggling with their constitution. Probably Ambedkar has to come back and send on a diplomatic mission to these countries, get something and come back to India. Okay? Do you want Ambedkar back in India at this point of time? Yes? Anybody know? If no, why? Why you don't want Ambedkar to be back now? अगर अंबेडकर अभी वापस आ जाएगा, one thing will definitely go, the reservations will go. He'll remove the reservations. बोला तुमको बोल के गया था मैं 15 साल से ज़्यादा नहीं रखना है और तुम साला अभी तक चला रहे हो इसको. बोला इसको हटाओ पहले. Next thing that will happen, what he will target? अरे तुम किताबें पढ़ रहे हो, किताब के अंदर का एसेंस नहीं पढ़ रहे हो. गांधी जी ऑलवेज वांटेड अ decentralized constitutional structures in India. Yes or no? He always said village as the center of development. He always said village में करो तो शहर में हो जाएगा automatically. village में करो, village में करो. Ambedkar said no, village में नहीं करूँगा. You need to enact a special constitutional amendment act to bring the PRIs, Panchayat Raj institutions. 73rd constitutional amendment came in 91-92 after nearly 45 years of independence they came. But Gandhiji always said give constitutional status to the lowest what you call echelon of power structures, that is the local self government. But Ambedkar did not give. Why? Because he was the draftsman of the constitution. By the time constitution came, Gandhiji bye bye हो गए थे, है ना? So when Gandhiji was not there, the path was very clear for Ambedkar to draft the constitution as per his thought. Yes or no? Very simple. Yes or no? So he said ये chapter उड़ा दो PRIs का, अब ये time नहीं है. Why he removed that chapter on giving constitutional status to the local self government when the constitution was adopted? Why a wise democrat? Ambedkar is called the wise democrat, right? The only democrat who is called wise democrat in the entire Indian context is Ambedkar only. He said, India, it is not the time ripe to give constitutional status to the local self government. The reason he said was, if I give constitutional status to the local self government in the present socio-cultural context, the women will never get power in India, because all the constitutional posts in the local village level, panchayat level will be strongly held by the male fraternity. They will not allow women to come anywhere closer to the power structures. He said time is not ripe. Educate the women first, then you give constitutional status. So that is the reason why Ambedkar is called a wise democrat. So these things should be self-learned. Nobody will take classes for you on these dimensions. Okay? So you need to understand this dimension. One more dimension that he is called wise democrat is when the J&K's constitution was adopted, special constitution, no, J&K ka. So they asked for a separate flag. That is when Ambedkar said there is no chance of a separate flag. Separate constitution also I have made it a temporary and transitionary arrangement. ये भी जाएगा, ज़्यादा दिन नहीं रहेगा. But as regards flag, it is next to impossible. It will not happen. So that is the reason why Ambedkar is called a wise democrat. ठीक है? So we probably need Ambedkar in Sri Lanka. What we will name him? Ambedkar Jayawardene. हाँ? ठीक है? चलो. And the third is IPKF. IPKF stands for India Peacekeeping Force. लिखो Indian Peacekeeping Force in Sri Lanka. What is the name of the operation that India conducted in Sri Lanka called? Operation? Hey. Operation Pumalai किसका था? I am not talking about this operation. I am talking about the 87-88. One operation is carried out in Sri Lanka called, तुम्हारा लोक ज्ञान जो है ना, स्कूल में कुछ कंपटीशन नहीं होता था, कुछ भी नहीं, स्कूल ही नहीं होता था सर, कौन सा कंपटीशन होगा? हाँ हाँ बोल कौमुदी. ऑपरेशन हनुमान जी का एक नाम है पवन. गुड. ऑपरेशन पवन. कौन है रे पवन भक्त यहाँ पे? हाँ? Pavan Putra Hanuman. So Operation Pavan. And third is Sri Lanka, as part of this Operation Pavan IPKF, Sri Lanka to disarm the LTTE and integrate them with Sri Lanka. Now see, try to understand the difference here. Who armed LTTE? India. And who was given the responsibility to disarm the LTTE? Right? Sri Lanka to disarm the LTTE. So you gave the weapon and you are asking Sri Lanka take that weapon now. Will he give that weapon? He will not give. And lastly, states to be given land, policing and building except, see in Sri Lanka, in India policing is a state subject. Yes or no? But in Sri Lanka it was not so. Policing was a central subject, and in all the provinces the police that was there, it was the central police. So that is the reason why Sri Lanka was a centrally administered country. It was more a unitary country and not a federal country in its pure spirit. So that is the reason why. So the land and policing to be given the state subjects was one of the what you call agreements that was signed between India and Sri Lanka. And we basically spoke about the power devolution in Sri Lanka for the Tamils and self-reliance for Tamils. This is what we were speaking about. Can anybody repeat the ground situation now? What is the ground situation? US support gone, Pakistan support gone, Sri Lanka isolated. The moment Sri Lanka isolated, who will become insecure? Obviously Sri Lanka will become insecure. That is the reason why you will see who called whom? Because Jayawardene felt insecure in the absence of the support of US and Pakistan. So he called Rajiv Gandhi. So now you see the insecurity tag shifting from people to people, country to country. Now under this the IPKF was sent to Sri Lanka to disarm the rebels. The operation was called Operation Pavan. For your information, one of the most disastrous operation carried out by India ever. One of the most disastrous operation carried out by India. Why? Because this operation was carried out in haste, jaldbazi mein, without any planning. The way we planned the 1971 operation, and the operation of 1971 was called, I feel like slapping myself. Maro. Lego, operation 1971. What was the name of the operation? Two operations are there. Please make a note. जितना मैं पढ़ाता हूँ उससे एक लकीर भी आगे नहीं जाना है ना? Raksha, what is the name of the operation? Operation Get Up Early Morning, Attend Oberoi Sir's class. I know this is your biggest operation as on today, but it will continue for times to come. Okay? Don't worry. Now, what happens? Under this, the IPKF was sent to Sri Lanka to disarm the rebels. Indian peacekeeping force was sent to Sri Lanka to disarm the rebels. Now, what happened? Some leaders committed suicide, some registered. Those Tamil leaders, some committed suicide while some resisted. Against this resistance, IPKF numbers were increased. This created a hodgepodge of situation. RAW trained the LTT, IB trained the TLO, and army went to IPKF. That's the biggest challenge. So these are the mistakes that we committed. It created a hodgepodge situation. Who trained them? RAW trained the LTT, IB trained the TLO for political negotiations, and finally who was sent to tackle the situation? Army was sent to tackle the situation. So what happens is, for the army, Sri Lankan terrain was new. RAW did not share the intelligence due to departmental rivalry, and ego clashes of these three entities was witnessed in IPKF. And because RAW was an important entity and there were some departmental what you call ego hassles between the army and the RAW, they did not share the requisite information, intelligence, that created disaster for IPKF. For LTT, it took the advantage of this mismanagement. It started inflicting heavy casualties as there was no pre-operational synchrony between the IPKF. So that is the reason why this LTT took advantage of this situation and inflicted heavy casualties on the Indian troops. Right? Now what happens? In the meanwhile, Rajiv Gandhi completed his tenure as a Prime Minister. VP Singh became the new Prime Minister, and finally in 1990, IPKF was withdrawn. Within 3 years, IPKF was withdrawn. RAW was told to stop the operations. IB was also called back. Now, complete withdrawal from Sri Lanka happened. But who is left there? Who is left there? What will be the morale of LTT at this stage? Because it fought successfully against a country's army that created it, and it forced that force to withdraw. It forced the RAW to stop its operations, and all the IB officials also went back. So, the communication channels with LTT completely cut off. So, now LTT is on its own in Sri Lanka. Now, only two entities are left, Sri Lanka and LTT. Now, the onerous responsibility of tackling the problem of LTT was left alone on the shoulders of Sri Lanka. Now, in this backdrop, Sri Lanka decides to fight LTT, and its fight to LTT was very clear mandate. It did not bother about any human rights violation. It went on bash on regardless against LTT, which created lot of human right violation issues for Sri Lanka, for which it is facing trouble even today. For which it is facing trouble even today after nearly 20 years of operations ending against LTT. So, you need to understand this dimension. So, it is basically Sri Lanka was India's Vietnam. So, that is what we gave a name. The Sri Lanka's operations or the Sri Lanka's exposure was India's Vietnam. The way US withdrew from Vietnam in a failed state of affairs, India also withdrew from Sri Lanka in a failed state of affairs, and India got lot of international condemnation for what happened in Sri Lanka, because the world knew that we created the monster of LTTE. Okay? Now, very important issue, make a note, 13th amendment issue. 13th amendment issue. But do not forget the 1987 India-Sri Lanka Accord, which Rajiv Gandhi signed. Very important. The way for every dimension of India-Pakistan relationship, now we fall back to Shimla Agreement 1972. The same way with Sri Lanka, for every dimension of issues that are pending with Sri Lanka, we always fall back to the India-Sri Lanka Accord of 1987. Okay? So, the Sri Lanka government in 1987 through the 13th amendment resorted to devolution of power, very, very important, devolution of power in the provincial councils. The devolution also included devolve power of land, buildings, police and finance. The Tamil provincial councils were created under the Provincial Councils Act number 42 of 1987. The northern and the northeastern provinces were to be one administrative unit and administered by one elected council, that is the Northeastern Provincial Council. So, they are trying to give certain amount of what you call autonomy to these provincial councils, right. India at one point of time linked the withdrawal of IPKF to the implementation of the 13th amendment. Matlab this was just a face saving. Okay, that I withdrew, basically they ensured that 13th amendment is being passed, but it was not so. We withdrew much before the 13th amendment was announced also, right. It means that initially the approach of Sri Lanka to address this issue was not military but political, because they are giving, but what LTT wants? Same case, northeastern India, what we gave is autonomy, but what the insurgents wanted? Swadhin Assam, Nagalim, Greater Nagalim, Swadhin Assam, Bodoland, separate, what you call territory, but what we gave? Only autonomy in their some affairs of their dealing. Okay? So, it is very similar to what was happening in India. Now, gradually the IPKF was recalled and the NEPC collapsed. LTT assassinated Rajiv Gandhi. What is this NEPC? The Northeastern because there was so much of resistance from the LTT, and in this backdrop LTT assassinates Rajiv Gandhi. So the mother created the monster killed the son. Simple logic. Okay? So that is how it happens, that whenever you create a monster you should be ready to pay a huge price. After the defeat of LTT in 2009, please make a note here, I will tell you something before we come to this particular slide. What is this time period? 1987. And what is this time period? 2009. From 1987 till 2009, Sri Lanka fought with LTT, the battle with LTT all alone without any external support. This you need to understand. So for 22 years, initially it was a combination of political dialogue and some military action, but gradually the political dialogue took a back step and it was only the military action against the LTT. It is said that in the final stages of battle of culmination of LTT, Sri Lanka was so brutal, even they did not spare the kids, the women, the children, or even the elders who were in that particular area, which were considered to be LTT strongholds. So even the last, if you have seen, I don't know if you have seen or not, the Prabhakaran's son, the way he is killed was video shooted by somebody. It was viral for some days, and the way it was shown to the public, that it is only to showcase how brutally Sri Lanka tried to suppress this LTT's problem. So in these 22 years of struggle, and this is the only parlance or only example in the entire world that the problem of insurgency or terrorism, whatever you call it, was solved purely with the power of the barrel of the gun. So they did not spare any, they did not even spare animals also, they butchered everybody. And it is said that, like I have had the honor of serving with the Sri Lankan army officers, and not me only, everybody else has observed this, because this was a long struggle with them, and this was only after 87, much before that also the struggle was there. What we observed is every second or third officer or the soldier of Sri Lanka has a physical disability, because he has served fighting the LTT, either the leg is amputated or the hand is amputated, some major physical bullet wounds in the body, other dimensional what you call issues. So that is the reason why across the globe the Sri Lankan army soldiers are revered for what they have done against the what you call LTT in that small island nation. So the struggle was for 22 years, they struggled and they finally were successful in eliminating. See, the advantage what Bangladesh had, Sri Lanka did not have. I told you Bangladesh had a beautiful situation after 1971. If Bangladesh is one country, I personally feel can survive without an army, because there is no need to have an army. Three sides I am giving protection, and my nature is that I don't want an inch of land, because in the land boundary agreement I gave more land and took only less land from you. So it means that I do not have any expansionist tendencies with you. So but that privileged neighborhood Sri Lanka did not get, despite the fact that it was the cultural backyard of my country, because of the wrong perceived notions of insecurity. Very, very important word. Because of the wrong perceived notions of insecurity, people played their cards at regular intervals in their own selfish interest at the cost of nation making in Sri Lanka. So it paid a huge price for this selfish interest of various entities from time to time. It started with the Dutch, it continued with the British, it then continued with Sri Lanka, India in some dimensions also. So very classic example how a beautiful nation can be destroyed because of self-interest in those countries. Okay? So this is where we will stop today. From here onwards, more factual content, what are the various issues that are going on in Sri Lanka, what are the various trade pacts that we have signed with Sri Lanka, what is happening on the trade front, what is the crisis that is happening in Sri Lanka, who is responsible for those crises and all. We will try to cover it tomorrow's class. Okay? Chalo. Anybody having any doubt, please ask. हाँ पूछो. अरे भैया, ask if you have any doubts. I was thinking कि आज हो जाएगा, but it took time. Maybe tomorrow first half will complete Sri Lanka, and then ఎక్కడ ఉంది ఎందుకు లేదు. What do you mean by democratic? Na. If the constitution is not democratic, is it a bad constitution? No. Then why do you ask that question? This is where the Western people are successful in telling you that democracy is the best form of governance. Advainda? See, in a family, the amount of freedom the father will give the daughter, he will not give the same freedom to son, especially grown up son. He will never give. Have you ever seen? Very rare. In that case, the father has to be very liberal to give that freedom to the daughter, to the son. The same amount of freedom what the mother gives to son, she will never give it to daughter. Yes or no? Yes, sir. Why is it so? Why is it so? Because? अरे बोलो यार, because? Why? Why is it so? My question is very simple. Please Google a word, Oedipus complex. Please Google a word, Oedipus complex. Oedipus. Oedipus complex. And who will explain me this tomorrow in the class? I need a volunteer. अरे कौमुदी तू बच गया, अरे ऐसे कैसे बच गया इतने दिन? इसको एक काम देते हैं अपन, है ना? कौमुदी, you will take a class on Hong Kong, its history, present and future. Hong Kong पता है ना? हाँ. So what is the issue with Hong Kong? What is going to happen in 2047? All these things you will tell. हाँ जी? वो जब आप लोगे, tomorrow you are taking, right? So on Monday we will have your. अरे तुम्हारी तो, तुमको किस बात की छुट्टी रे? भाई रे लीव तुम साला. If you don't go, your parents will be happy. అబ్బా ప్రశాంతంగా ఏమో పండగ చేసుకోవచ్చు, వీళ్ళు వస్తే పెద్ద తలకాయ నొప్పి అని చెప్పేసి. So Monday is a holiday. Monday is what date? 13 15. Monday is 16. तुम्हारी तो आज क्या डेट है रे? 11 है. Today is Thursday. So today is Wednesday. Okay. See, I have lost track of day and dates also. So today is Wednesday. Tomorrow she'll take. Day after you take. Class है? We'll cancel Friday's holiday for her class. ये एक काम करते हैं. 5 minutes you take, 5-7 minutes she'll take 5-7 minutes. ठीक है tomorrow? हाँ? बेटा कल क्लास है, तेरा सर फोड़ दूंगा, ठीक है? कल नहीं आएगा क्लास में, ठीक है? Raksha, you are also left. Don't worry. My eyes are on you. Don't worry. I'll take time to give you a topic. Yeah. You are asking something? Somebody was asking something. हाँ, ओडिपस कॉम्प्लेक्स पढ़ के आना कल, ठीक है? मैं उसके ऊपर सवाल पूछूंगा. 2 और सवाल देते, क्या है थोड़ा रिपीट करना. आप फॉरगॉटन, स्टार्टिंग में दिया था 2 होमवर्क. हाँ Who are the Dutch and all? Second, ఎందుకు చూపిస్తారు? ఓకే, సో 3 homeworks for you today, right? రే నేను చంపేస్తారా? అఫీషియల్ నేమ్, ఓకే, ఇండియా's అఫీషియల్ నేమ్. సో దీస్ 4 questions का आंसर I will ask any one of you. You should be ready to answer these questions. ठीक है? ఒరే నిన్ను చంపేస్తారా? ఎందుకు చెప్పు, అవసరమా నీకు? Don't think I will come to rescue you. I will not come. Okay? Chalo, thank you.